Welcome to One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers, where we get curious about what makes us tick. We're here today with a man who guides projects from start to finish, a conductor of journeys. Welcome, Jamie McKain.
Good morning. Great to be here, Ian.
Yeah, great. I mean, obviously we've spoken lots, but it's really great for you to come on the show and actually, we can talk about all things creative and thinking. So let's
excellent. Well, I've been looking forward to getting involved with the podcasts. I've been enjoying listening to them, so now it's my turn.
Excellent. So here you are in the studio. Let's start off then about telling us what you do now.
What I do now? Well, I work a lot of my time with thinking it better. Really interested in not just bringing forward all the project management experience and knowledge I've got, but probably more broadly being able to help others. That's a real important thing to me. So bringing not just that project management, but attitude, behaviour and mindset into the way that people do the things they do.
So tell us about your most recent project that you've been involved with.
Well, one that you'll recognise, Ian, so working with DA Aviation. Bit of a surprise project for me. So it came with not too many requirements and at quite short notice when I was doing other work, which is, I suppose, the life of a project manager often. And so trying to build up an understanding of, we want you to deliver a whole package of training so that 6 or 7 individuals can pass a big PMQ exam at the end of it. And really just starting with a study guide and a textbook and going, well, that's the content. We've got to get people engaged and get them learning.
And what do you think is the secret ingredient of getting people engaged and involved in learning and wanting to learn how to run a project properly?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, particularly now that it's adults in the main, it's adults that we're dealing with, and the way adults learn is often quite different to children. They're less prepared to take big risks or do something silly which might make other people judge or laugh at them. So, adults expect a very different way to learn. And again, there's no one way either, so there's lots of different people. But in terms of, therefore, engaging them and what they do, I think there's often a need to, you seek out what they think. You ask the questions. I think, in my mind, there's more of a coaching approach. So adults don't generally want to be told what to do. They would rather come to their own conclusions. Yeah. So you've got to help them to do that. I think that's the engaging piece. So whilst in a room with people on Zoom, if you're trying to get that engagement, you've got to ask questions. And
then how do you do that? I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? How people learn. So what kind of thing? What environment are you trying to create when you're working with adults? In a business context. How do you generate that engagement?
I suppose there's a number of different ways. One way is just maybe the format or the way in which you deliver the work. So I think one of the things even I've learned more recently is do it in lots of different ways, because that adults will learn differently. Then somebody needs 10-minute updates, somebody needs classroom training, and some other people want to do it at their own speed, and maybe they need the textbook. So I think it's offering up quite a broad way that they can pick and choose little bits of how they learn is an important step. Yeah. That's one thing I've definitely tried to do much more this time than ever before.
Yeah. And that then is when your role as the conductor of the journey that they're on becomes quite important then. Yeah.
It does. And what's interesting, I suppose, for me, one of the big learning points I had was, yes, I had a textbook of this is the content, but I started the journey without knowing what the end was going to be. And so trying to set out a way of working and what are the standards, how am I going to present this material, and how does that still leave me with opportunities as we go to build it further, broaden it out, focus in on one area, so it's kind of leaving that flexibility whilst still trying to stay true to the material that you're trying to cover.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we'll touch it in the conversation as well, but I mean, that's a most recent project where you've been dealing with people and imparting knowledge and a skill. But I mean, you've been involved in some pretty huge engineering projects in your career as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely right. I think the ones that are most interesting to me are often the transformational ones.
Okay.
And I suppose by their nature, they tend to be pretty broad. I think within a lot of projects, if you're delivering hardware or some sort of technical element, you can you can get away a little bit more with some of the other behavioural stuff, because the outcome is much more clear. People kind of go, well, you're trying to deliver this widget, or you're trying to deliver that tangible thing, I get it. And so the journey is maybe easier. People have got the same insight as you. What I found whilst trying to do some of the bigger transformational ones was, how do you describe the outcome of the project when you don't know it yourself? And nobody knows it. There's no answer to this. There's just the destination is we will have changed the way we work.
That's really interesting. I'd never really thought of that before, but you're right, aren't you? When you're delivering a building, an engineering thing, it is very tangible, isn't it? But I'd not actually quite thought, as you say there, how you could almost get away without dealing with the behavioural side. Yeah, no, I like that. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let me just ask you, what happens when you're not working there? So what do you do outside of work?
Well, I try and fill my days. I've got a family, and 2 fairly young children now. So trying to make sure that we're doing things which are interesting and exciting, trying to soak up the experiences. As everyone always says, your children grow up fast. So trying to find the time to say, no, we're going to do something this weekend, we're going to go out tonight. And we spend a lot of time going to maybe concerts or theatre shows, because I love that stuff, but also it's a great way to spend some time, as a family, where we can all join in. So I love doing all that sort of stuff with the family. But I'm also quite focused in on my personal needs to some extent. When I left corporate employment, if you like, which is a few years ago now, one thing I realised was I didn't really spend much time even thinking about what I was doing. I kind of got in the car, commuted to work, I came back, had the commute back, I got back in the room, and I'd be like, well, now it's time for tea, and then we'd literally sit down for an hour of telly or something and go, whoa, like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, that's the day gone. And I think if you're not conscious of just spending a minute for yourself, or just going, what is it that helps me just recharge and go again for the day after, then over time that just drains away at you. So things that are big for me are music. I love music. I play the piano, I play the saxophone, not very well, because I used to do it when I was a kid, and it's kind of just sits in the box more than I play it now. But having a piano in the house and just being able to sort of sit down at any time of the day and just play something is, just clears the mind. Just takes you to a different place, and then I could get back up to my chair and I can almost start fresh again from that moment.
If you recharge.
Yeah.
And if you found, since leaving the corporate world and taking more control of your time, have you noticed a real change in how you are as a result of that?
I definitely have. Yeah, I definitely have, Ian. I mean, some of it is physical health. It kind of just helps you to make sure you're finding the time for that physical activity rather than just sitting at a desk all day.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also to do with working from home, pandemic effects. But, I certainly have a bit more of a physical, kind of active day-to-day life than I used to have.
Yeah.
But more than anything, it's that idea that if I spend time bit of thinking about myself, bit of thinking about my mindset, one of the big things in my life has kind of been thinking about cognitive bias, and particularly this idea of like negativity, the negativity bias. So, and the knowledge that we all find it easier to absorb the negative stuff that people say about us. People didn't like my comment. All that sort of stuff hits people hard.
Yeah.
But the 10,000 likes that you already had kind of just washes over you and you ignore it.
Right.
So spending a bit of time every morning for me going, so what was positive about yesterday? What was great stuff that's happened this week? What great times have I spent with my kids? And by doing a quick sort of 10-minute check each morning and almost going, it's like a tick list to some extent, but bit more than that. But that idea of going, take some credit for the fact you've wanted to spend time with your kids. Take some time to credit yourself for, we did that date night that we've been saying we should have done for months. Because that stuff for me is much more valuable than any of the other stuff that I do.
That's really interesting. And when you go through that process, is that a mental process? Do you write it down? How do you go through that process?
Yeah, well, you and I have talked very recently around this idea of personalities and what's your natural tendency. And I am a little bit process driven. And so I've made this into a bit of a process. Certainly made it into a habit is what I've done. So I've created a way that I like to go through it. So I know I can do something in 10 minutes every day. And every week I'll just do a quick check. And every quarter I'll go, let's just spend half an hour thinking this through.
Yeah.
So I've found this way of capturing it on a little bit of paper, like a little tick circle sheet, and I'll do that Like every few days, just to make sure I'm keeping up to date and registering the good stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm an engineer.
Right.
Processes are good. I've made a process out of it.
It's interesting. So, and I know it's something that we've touched in the past as well. There was it must be 18 months ago now. A mutual friend of ours, Mel, came up with the idea of the 100-day challenge, and every day writing in a book just a few things that you were grateful for that day, three things. And I really enjoyed that, and this is part of this what we're talking about here. It's getting that positive bias early in the day, and so that writing it down in a book, that worked for me at that time. But everyone's different, aren't they? And so sometimes now, rather than write it down, I will think it. So I think it's important, isn't it, to find something that works for the individual.
Absolutely right. And even for me, it's evolved quite massively. When I first started doing it, I suppose it wasn't quite a habit. It took me a bit more time to often get through the sort of thinking I wanted to do. I used to include a sort of 2-page little element where I'd go, well, just write down your thoughts, just write down stuff. Whatever comes to mind, write it down, and just whatever it is, doesn't need to make sense. It's just it is. And bizarrely, I'd find it incredibly easy to get to the end of a second page and go, I've just literally been free writing for 2 pages, and where did that come from? Almost. But I don't do that anymore. That was something that was like when I had maybe a bit more time, when my mind was in a different place, that was what was important to me, and that was useful to kind of clear the brain of all the stuff that was happening. Whereas now I'm much more focused in on, well, I know the bits of this that I want to work out of it, and I know that there's a bit more time pressure than I've had before, so I've got to find a way to do this. But it's like when people go to the gym for physical health, do you go to the gym and go, I'm going to spend the next 6 hours here, and when it suits me, I'll do a few weights, then I'll sit down and have a coffee, then I'll go back swimming. You tend not to spend all day at the gym. You go, I've got an hour, I'm going to go to the gym, I'll do a 20-minute run. You figure out what you want to do, and again, I end up with a routine that I'll end up doing. But for people, I think, you've got a time pressure, so you've got to be able to fit in what you do, and so you evolve the process of whatever it is you're trying to run to fit those needs.
I think we touch a very significant point here. I think the thing which there is no doubt about is maintaining this positive bias. Whether we call it being grateful or whatever, but maintaining that positive bias is really important. But it can be, when you go looking for this stuff or it gets presented to you, it can be very formulaic. You must write this down in the morning, you must use this process, be mindful, meditate, all those things. And if you are process and habit driven, that probably sits with you really well. But if you're less, and you're maybe a bit more laissez-faire, or you're more creative, or it's got to have a process can be a bit alien to you. So I think it is important to work it through personally and try and find some way of getting that, getting it done. There was a thing, I remember talking to someone a few weeks back now, it was at a race circuit actually, of mindful teeth cleaning. You've got a time of the day where you've usually got a mirror in front of you as well, so you can actually have a conversation with you, and that 2 minutes or whatever that you're cleaning your teeth is to use that moment to give yourself a talking to for that day. Or
it can be, and it's a great thing from James Clear, isn't it, when he's done the Atomic Habits. He talks about having triggers in your day that you will do just naturally, and using that as a trigger to then go, well, now that I'm doing this, do something else, do something good. So even if it's a bad habit, whatever habits you've got, one that you will always do, so it's like open the curtains, use that minute to go, I've opened the curtains, my brain now has a habitual need to go, it's a great day. And that'll just set you up for the day in a way.
Love that.
Or brush your teeth, and brushing your teeth makes you trigger a thought process, 2 minutes thinking about yourself, or clearing your head.
It's great because there's so many things that we must do every day. I mean, that's a great picture in my mind. Open the curtains, and what a great moment. You're almost like revealing the day, aren't you? And take that moment to say, okay, let's check in here.
And habits are something that you do naturally just by their very nature. So being able to find a way that you just build it into your life. And we were talking about the project earlier with DEA. That's something that I've spent a lot of time with them. So yes, let's do the textbook. The other half of it is, so how can we help you build good study habits? you're going to be sitting an exam in a number of weeks. That exam is now online, so that's different for everybody. They're going, you've got to set up 2 cameras, you've got to have an ability to show the room so they know that you're not putting textbooks on your lap and things. So, I've started saying to them, so why don't you revise in that space? Why don't you set up that space as if it's going to be your exam? Because when you sit down that day, it'll just be a habit to go, this is a great place to study. And this is where I do my PMQ.
Yeah.
So making it easy for people to do that sort of stuff and have those little habits is something we can condition and build in every day.
I remember having this conversation with people during the multiple lockdowns that we had here in the UK as well, about when you're sharing a workspace, if the kitchen table is the home teaching and it's the eating place and it's the workplace, is just having some kind of trigger or cue that switches between those roles.
Yeah. Location's a big one. I think I've read it, I think it might have been James Clear again, or it might have been Charles Duhigg did a big thing on the power of habit. And location is a critical one in there. So if you've ever walked around a house, gone somewhere to get something and gone, oh, what was I coming here for again? If you go back to where you were and the location where you had that memory, it'll be a primer to you, it'll come back to me. So yes, we know the one around, it'll come to me, it's in there, it will come to me. But if you go back to where you were, it's probably even more likely that it'll just come back quicker.
Because the trigger will be there.
The location is the trigger, yeah. So but little things like that are critical. So we're all subject to habits that we may or may not like. We're all subject to loads and loads of cognitive bias, which we're completely unconscious of and may be helpful or not in our lives. And I just think raising your level of awareness to these things is great. So if brushing your teeth in the morning helps you just raise your awareness to, I should be thinking about something at this point in the day, I should be giving myself a bit of a positive view of the day, then use that trigger because it comes for free.
Brilliant. I love it. Let's just take a step backwards now and just tell us, how did you arrive at what you're doing now? So take us back as far as you want and just navigate for us the Jamie McKain story up to this point.
I mean, really briefly, we could say, everybody all got to school, or came through university, very quickly got a job. I was working at Rolls-Royce. It was a local company in a way. I was at university in Glasgow, so going to somewhere just outside Glasgow to work was a great opportunity.
And this is Rolls-Royce aero engines as opposed to... Yeah,
that's correct, yeah. So, I kind of almost unconsciously stepped into all these sort of things. I did well in my exams. Yes, I put the effort in, but I did well enough to get to university. I did well. I came well enough to have a company like Rolls-Royce be interested. But I kind of just went into corporate life, and I just went into that. There's loads of learning comes from it. The stream runs fast, I think, when you're in a corporate world. So you just kind of go with the flow with a lot of it. So it's kind of like 15 years past. And I've done tons of stuff. I worked in Brazil. I worked in Bristol. I travelled up and down the UK. I went across to Europe. Aerospace industry gives you enormous opportunity to go all over the world and do all sorts of things. But after about 15 years, I suppose, I started to have sort of thoughts around, is this really what I want to be doing? And did nothing about it. I had those thoughts, but did nothing. And then in 2014, I fell really, really unwell. I had 3 to 6 months of what I thought was really serious food poisoning, but obviously food poisoning doesn't last that long. So I ended up I ended up in hospital. First time since the day I was born. I was in a hospital bed, and they very quickly diagnosed me having lost about 3 stone in weight, having been unable to get out of the house. I went very quickly from being fit and well into being, literally bedridden. And they went, you've got ulcerative colitis. So it's akin to people who have Crohn's. That's maybe the better known part of it. And it's a digestive issue which, lots of people suffer from. And it can be pretty debilitating. So for me, it was. So from diagnosis, I ended up, we could have a podcast on this on its own. I had about 12 months of in and out of hospital, all sorts of things happening. Every treatment they try, they say, don't worry, 80% of people respond to this treatment. I kept being the 20%. So I was on the other side. So it took about a year to the day when the surgeon was at my bed. My wife was there with me, and I literally wasn't with it. I wasn't there at all. And sort of in mind, and they came in and he went, we're going to remove his bowel. That's the cure. He's in a terrible state. He's lost all this weight. This is the only answer we can think of. And my wife just went, look, can we give it the weekend? Because I know this isn't what you'd want. And they said, yeah, we've maybe got one treatment we can try for you, which is really extreme, but you need to get through the weekend first. And if anything happens, surgeon's on call, he'll be in, you'll be on the operating table, it'll be done. There's no question now. So going through all that sort of process was pretty crazy. Luckily, over that weekend, nothing happened. And on a Monday, I started a new sort of drug trial, almost, called biologics. And from that day forward, I just started getting better day after day. Still took another 18 months to 2 years for me to get back to where I went, I'm normal. But effectively, my life just transformed from 2014 to 2016, 17. It was be really ill and spend all this time recovering. I mean, that's had a massive, massive effect on my life.
Yeah.
My kids, my son was too young to know about it, but my daughter still remembers it from when she was 3 or 4 years old. And it kind of really brought home to me the importance of, life, not work.
Yeah.
Making sure you find the time to do all this sort of stuff that you want to do and what you want to do with your kids and with your family, rather than going, well, I've just got to get this next report done, or I'll work through tonight so I can get an extra bit of work done. Nobody ever thanks you for that.
Yeah.
In a way, so that changed my life.
Yeah.
And it made me even more focused in on that mindset. What is it that got me through all that?
Yeah.
What was the focus I had that said, no matter how bad it's going to get, I think I'm going to get better. I always thought I'm going to get better. Even, there'll be days if somebody went back to me and said, what about this day? I remember what happened on that day. Yeah, there's moments. Yeah. But in general, there was like I keep on looking back on it going, it's going to get better. Yeah. It's going to get better. So I always feel that that's something I want to kind of give back to other people, because it shouldn't take a serious illness, shouldn't take hospitalisation, shouldn't take a heart attack for you to go, I've got to change some things here. And that's what did it for me.
Yeah. That's hugely powerful. And yeah, you can really see how, I know you're very passionate about what you do now, and that's obviously had a huge role in that. Because did you not? You're also a mental health first aider, aren't you? As well? Tell us a bit about that, because that's part of this journey too, isn't it?
It is. So during that sort of recovery period, I went through the first thing, which was like, just get back to normal. We're all doing that at the moment, aren't we? It's like, oh, pandemic was over, let's get back to normal.
Whatever that is.
And that happened to me as well. So I ended up back in corporate employment. I'm really thankful that they literally kept paying me for a year when I just couldn't turn up at work, and looked after me for a year when I couldn't work full time. So they gave me that time that I needed, that many people don't get, to go through that recovery process. And it was at the end of that when I started going, what are the things that, how could I help other people? And some of that was, there's all this big thing coming out about mental health. It was becoming a much bigger part of, mental resilience was part of, people talked about it a lot at work. Maybe weren't massively active, but they talked about it a lot. And so I went, well, what can I do? One of the big realization moments I'd got around thinking's great, thinking's really important, but it's got to lead to doing. And that for me, I was going, I think it's great to give money to charity. How much money have you given to charity in the last 3 years or 5 years? Oh, none. Like 10p in a thing. I think it's really important that, I spend time with my kids. Well, how much time have you actually done it in the last 2 years? Oh, I'm at work. I'm busy. So you'll find a lot of excuses for that sort of stuff. And I sort of started going, things like mental health first aid, Mind as a charity. There's a lot of stuff out there now where you start going, you've got to start focusing on this. We all have to as individuals. Back to the analogy of trying to do something get physically fit, getting mentally fit, being mentally resilient. It doesn't come for free.
No.
So getting into mental health first aid for me was a first introduction into a really structured or a way in which you can learn about what's happening and what people are going through. I've got my own mental health struggles. I've been through my own challenges, so I kind of understand a bit of it. So maybe I can be more empathetic to that. But I've not had depression. I've not had psychosis. I've not been suicidal. And people that get those, people are in those spaces. You've got to be able to be there for them. You've got to be, even if you don't know them. It's the old finding somebody on the railway station platform and you just think they're acting odd. Go and speak to them. Because that's really what some of the mental health first aid stuff is trying to do for you. So just be aware of it. So I'd probably bring out the one thing that particularly on mental health first aid does, back to my maybe a need for a roadmap, or it's comfortable for me. They talk about this algae approach. And what that's trying to say to you is just have almost like a mental prompt. So assess the situation, what's happening.
Yeah.
Listen and try and listen to what the person's saying, but listen non-judgmentally. That's really important. So you're not going, you sound like you're crazy, I'd rather not be here, which might be your natural response. You then move on to G, where you're looking at, can you give some sort of advice or guidance? I mean, I suppose it's not really advice you're trying to give, but can you give support? Can you give something to them so that you're aware of the situation and you're with them? And then the 2 E's at the end are around encouragement. So it's like encouraging them then to go and seek professional help if that's what's needed, or self-help if that's something they can do.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing for me in terms of that whole mental health first aid thing is it's focused quite a lot by its very nature on some of the more serious mental health issues that you can deal with. And I suppose where most of us spend 99% of our life is in spaces where people might be suffering that, but it won't be obvious. And actually people might be suffering something, but it's probably not those extreme cases. It might be you're starting to suffer from some things which may lead to depression. So let's try and deal with that, and let's be aware of that before it happens. So that's the kind of space I find quite comfortable to be able to work in now. So be aware of the sort of the areas of mental health issues where we can get to, but by just having a focus on mental wellness and mental health, then you can do something to stop people ending up in that sort of worst case situation.
I think this is an under talked about area, because mental health, when people talk about it, they think about the more extreme ones, as you've said, depression and and this kind of thing. But I think if I really reflect on it, I don't think I've met anyone who hasn't had or is having some kind of mental health issue. And that doesn't mean that they're crazy people, but we all have this pot of stuff we're able to deal with on a daily basis, and it might be remembering to buy this, get the car serviced, cut the grass, post that birthday card, right up to go and check in on an elderly relative, up to worry about health issues. And we've all got that pot, haven't we?
We do.
And each of our pots are different. And it may only take one thing, someone cuts you up on the road, or someone doesn't hold a door open for you, and suddenly you're faced with all sorts of stuff going, because you're suddenly overwhelmed. And
those are those habits that you don't recognise. We wouldn't even call them habits, but
no.
Your reaction to somebody cutting you up is a conditioned way in which you respond to those situations, because for some reason shouting it in the middle of your car or beeping your horn is going to fix something.
Yeah.
Maybe it does for you. You go, I've released that tension, now I can move on.
Yeah.
But certainly the whole thing around, at what point do you hit enough tension or pressure that you go, right, I need to stop and think differently about this. The thing for me, funnily enough, in the middle of all my recovery from ulcerative colitis, was they went, some of it's genetic, you've got no control over that. Yeah. So we all know what we should do with things we can't control. You've got to just let them be.
Yeah.
There's a bit which is around it's your diet and your conditioning and the environment that you live in. So I can do something about that. So let's work on the things that we can do something with and build those as good habits, and just accept that other stuff is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose it's wouldn't it be great if we all spent as much time looking after our mental fitness as we did over our physical fitness as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I've found, like I say, 10 minutes every day for me. And it works quite well with some of this new modern sort of technology. So I do it on paper. Like you said, people like to do it different ways. You can do it on little apps, and the apps will give you that sort of reward that says, oh, guess what, you've done it again today. That's 10 in a row.
Yep.
And that's a helpful little habit as well, though, because you get into this, as long as I think it's a good habit and it's helping me, then why not reward yourself for doing it days in a row? But the sort of look of the work, the way you deal with when you stop that one day is the important thing, though. So you then go, so if I miss one day, what do I do? Start the next day and start again. Just go. Don't go, I missed a day. I should. It's so too difficult.
Isn't it? You try something new and then you beat yourself up. You've been going to the gym regularly or running regularly, whatever it is, and then life kind of means that over the last 2 weeks, I didn't manage to do it yesterday. I didn't manage to do it yesterday, and you start beating yourself up.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, okay,
can't fix yesterday. Yeah, I'll go tomorrow.
Let's go tomorrow.
Yeah. Absolutely right. And it's quite again, I know it's a personal thing, isn't it? So I know I'm an engineer. I know that I can be quite binary in that sort of mindset. I can quite easily leave things behind, and some people can't. Some people, it kind of lingers and it holds on to them. So again, I'm not going to tell somebody how to be better or change the way that affects them, but you do need to try and help people figure out, well, what are the triggers that are causing these things to happen, and now that they've happened, what can we do to help you find a way that you can cope and manage that situation and move on from it. It's a positive and a negative. I'm incredibly fortunate to have something that allows me to sort of just move on very quickly from stuff, but it also leaves other people who can't do that looking at me going, has he just not realised what's happened? I'm going, I'm off.
Yeah, it's interesting. So let's just take that whole journey now and all that stuff. I mean, what a great set of experiences. But now bringing it up to present day, this is going to inevitably play out, isn't it, with the way that you are with your children.
Mm-hmm.
So do you you're a musician, your children are into music too. Do you find a lot of the stuff that you would lead projects and processes with, does that play out with Jamie the dad?
Yeah, it does. I've had a passion for music for my whole life, and I just find it's been a useful thing on so many fronts. Not just, we've talked earlier around its mental strengthening and resilience it gives me, but also even things as simple as, my son, when he was 4, started playing the piano. I didn't start till I was probably almost in my teens. It's just something I wanted to do. I liked music. I started. So I kind of got him started much earlier, let him just play on the piano. But, if you look at things like, time signatures, composers and stuff, they can learn maths and English and history through, they think they're doing music, they're learning everything else, all the context that goes around it.
Yeah.
So that stuff I found was great. And I kind of wanted to give, if nothing else, is that passion for music, because I know it can give so much more. Yeah. I listen to so many people in their 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s going, I wish I'd learned a musical instrument. I wish I could play something. And the answer is always, you can start now. But obviously it's for people that started even earlier. It's something I can sit down at a piano and you go, what tune do I want to play today? I can spend an hour just playing different things. So that's just another, as part of my mental wellness, isn't it? So that's the thing I want my children to have. I don't want them to be the world's best pianists. I don't want them to necessarily have a career in music, but I want them to be able to have music in their lives. So that's a key thing for me. But I think the other part for me is maybe the stuff that we sort of do on mindset. I can't help myself but try and just, without preaching about it, but try and give them a little bit more of that mindset about going, why are you thinking that way? Asking them questions about, what else do you think you could do in this situation? Yeah. Just trying to get them to go, you don't need to squabble and react, and you need to have this ability in your life to just have a bit more of a positive outlook in life. Because more so now than ever, I'm certainly finding, if you look at the teenagers that are coming through that have been exposed to social media, there's good stuff, but all the ills of that, if they haven't also had somebody trying to say to them, again, negativity bias, those 10,000 likes are great, don't worry about the one where somebody's giving you nasty comments. You've got to be able to walk past that sort of stuff and focus on what you're grateful for, sort of stuff. And if you do that, if you can get the balance, then actually that's fine. Just don't get lost in a little bit of bad news.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because on that as well, I mean, there has been an experience with a group of people that I'm dealing with at the minute, and we've got this very, very talented young Carter, and he's been exposed to some bullying, people saying some pretty horrid things, but he's brilliant. He's brilliant. He's very, very talented, and fortunately, he's surrounded by people who are supportive. But the chink in the armour that one bit of bullying does, that it's almost like that's the kryptonite, and it's easy to forget all that other stuff, which is why it's so important, isn't it, to keep focus, keep that positive bias. Yeah. As much as you possibly can. Yeah.
And I think, like you were trying to say earlier, it's not this sort of idea of like toxic positivity and just positive for all situations all the time. Even when people are telling you really awful news, you kind of got to be aware of the situation. But it's that ability to sort of stop yourself before you go down the plug hole of, everything's terrible. You go, no, stop. Let's just look at the facts. Let's look at what's happening. Let's look at that one comment. Let's look at the other ones which are good. Just find yourself a way to sort of disconnect yourself from your mind, which might try and take you there.
And it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. For me, it's more about awareness, isn't it? If you are aware of what's happening, then you can stop yourself before it becomes harmful and difficult.
Yeah.
And I suppose what we do with things like mental health first aid is realise that some people don't know or can't sense that boundary.
Yeah.
I suppose I often think about how often do we eat an enormous meal and then we just keep eating and eating and we go, I think I'm pretty full now. And you've eaten way too much, but you just keep eating, and then somebody brings dessert and you have more, and you knew ages ago you'd had enough, but your brain, the connection between your brain and your digestive system is pretty slow. So you've gone on and just eaten way too much. I think it's the same with a lot of other things. Your brain is quick in terms of its reactions to physical things, but it will let stuff deteriorate, it will let stuff happen, and you just kind of lose control of it. And then that's the bits when it gets to a point where you go, well, I've just now got myself into needing medical attention and care.
Yeah.
And it's just drifted without me really knowing.
And that could be, that you're doing something physical that you know isn't good for you, but you're going to keep doing it, or something which is, mental bias. I'm going to keep scrolling, and I know it's not making me feel good, but I'm going to keep scrolling.
Or when that's another habit, isn't it? So when you realise you've been scrolling for a period of time, it doesn't matter how long it is, and you go, oh, wait a minute. First of all, the awareness of going, I've been scrolling for quite a while. Use that as a habit to go and say, well, actually, I should go and do something different now. Let's go in there. Let's go and go for that run that I should have done. So if you, again, like brushing your teeth, if you're always on social media and you want to do it every day, that's fine. But give yourself a little reward at the end of it that goes, now that I've done this for 5 minutes and I'm aware of it, go and do something good.
That's brilliant. We could talk and talk and talk, but I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to ask you the final question.
Sure.
Which you'll be familiar, having listened to the other podcasts, so you might have had the advantage of being able to think about this. So, Jamie, let's assume that we've cracked time travel. And with all this journey that you've been on, imagine now you can write yourself a note and put it in a sealed envelope and leave it for your younger self to find somewhere. What would you write to yourself? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny. It's the sort of thing I have thought through before, but not maybe in that as a question like that. One thing I look back on so many times now and go is almost confidence. Have more confidence in yourself. I've kind of worked through most situations, got on with it, but when I've started to watch other people achieve maybe things that I thought, well, I could do that, but I didn't, I'll just go, it's often because my own self-talk or my own sort of mindset would be, oh, well, are you sure? You probably need to know a little bit more about this first before you go and do it. So, if my younger self could just be a bit more confident in my own abilities of what, you're good enough now, so be confident about it and go and give it your best shot. So step into those situations and go and do those things rather than not doing them. And it would probably take, there's lots of situations in my life where I did take the opportunity. Going and working in Brazil was a time when I did that. But I still think there was so many other opportunities and just day-to-day things that happened around me where I would just let it go. I suppose it's like being in a classroom and somebody goes, which kids put their hands up and which kids don't. I suppose I'm a don't put your hand up. Certainly not first,
Yeah.
Let others go first, and then you come in at some point when it feels like you know what's going on. I just go for it.
So your note would be more confident.
Yeah.
Be the person who puts the hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jamie, that's brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
It's been a pleasure. Great to talk to you, Ian.
So this has been One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers and our guest this time, Jamie McKain. I hope you've taken something positive from the show today. If you'd like to reach out to Jamie, our guest today, you can find Jamie McKain on LinkedIn. If you'd like to reach out to the show, you can find us on TikTok and on LinkedIn and on YouTube and on Instagram at Thinking It Better. Please rate and share the show. It really goes a long way to helping us find and reach out to others who can get something positive from this. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.